Young's already.
Yeah.
Who's that other one? Oh, that's the lady that's going to do the talking.
Mhm. Speaking. Hello, Barbara and I are new people here.
Hello, John and Barbara. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm glad to be here.
Lovely. How did you find out about us?
We belong to a sitting group whose members had mentioned your name. And the sitting group is affiliated to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Arlington.
Yes.
And if they haven't already been, they will be in touch with you.
Mm-hmm. They have a little bit, and I expect that they'll be in touch a little bit more. But yes, Stig and Susan Chastain and
Okay.
a number of people, yes.
Great,
I'm,
John.
Barbara and I are part of that working group.
Wonderful.
And
Very nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you. The head of the working group is David McTaggart, who is Susan Young's husband.
Ah, got it. Yes.
There's already
Wonderful.
threads and tentacles there. Or
Keep it interesting. Keep it interesting.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, welcome again, and
Thank you.
good to meet you.
Thank you. Yeah, her and I agree. I think it was. I don't think she remembers us.
Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. How do you keep your puppy occupied during these sessions?
Well, so last week, in the past, what had happened was that he would just basically settle down like after 5 or 10 minutes of the meditation. He just sort of tuned in and would fall asleep. But then last week, week 12 of his life, he was really wound up. And he started shredding books in the library, and he started doing all kinds of things while I'm talking, right? So I'm talking and I'm seeing all this going on in the background. So this week, today, I have a new tactic, which is twofold. One is I took him on a much longer walk than usual right before this. So he's already passed out. He's lying down over there like, and I changed the configuration of his playpen so that he can't actually reach the bookcase at all or the kitchen at all. So he's just kind of in his little playpen over there. So we'll see how it goes. Because he loves people. He really, really loves people. And he gets very excited and energized when people come in the room. And so then, again, he has to kind of like settle down again from that. But it's all right. He's learning. He's learning. Unfortunately, it wasn't Dhamma books. What I had on that lower shelf were like the poetry and, some other things my family had given me and some dictionaries and stuff. It's nothing important. So welcome, everyone. We're just going to allow another minute or two, as we usually do, so that folks can continue to arrive and settle in.
Hi. Hey, baby. Hey, did you finish your supper? I told you she. She said, "Go."
You're not, I've got the love. You see that in the corner?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to ask everyone to go ahead and mute their mics. And we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever part of the world you happen to be in. This is our Tuesday tune-in, regular weekly program, Dhamma program. And just to mention that it says live on YouTube on your screen there, but we're not exactly streaming live. We're just capturing the recording that way. And then the recordings will be actually on our new Dasanaya YouTube channel, Dasanaya Buddhist Community YouTube channel. But as usual, we are going to go ahead and begin with a guided meditation and meditate for about 25 minutes or so, and then shift into the Dhamma talk. And I'll attempt to talk for about 30 minutes or so, and then leave some time for questions and comments at the end. And for this evening, I thought that it would be nice to do a 4 elements meditation. So we'll go ahead. It's a form of, most of you probably know that it's one of the mindfulness of body meditations. So yes, you can begin by settling into your meditation posture, maybe rocking the body a bit to loosen up any tension or any tendency to lean toward the computer. Feeling the body settling on your seat. And releasing the lower belly. Sensing that natural stability of the body. And beginning to align the spine as best you can. All the way up through the neck. And the head resting gently on top of the spine. And beginning at the crown of the head, just becoming aware of the earth element in every cell of the body. And scanning downward from the crown, just knowing that there is earth throughout the body. Down through the neck and the right shoulder. Just slowly knowing the firmness of earth, solidity, moving down that right arm. Aware of earth in the right hand. And then in the left hand. Just knowing that there is earth element, firmness, solidity. And moving up the left arm. Eventually arriving at that left shoulder. Also pervaded by the earth element. And then beginning to move slowly, slowly down the torso. No need to strain to feel it, just knowing that there is earth in every part of the body. That stability, that groundedness. All the way down to the hips. Earth element. And now knowing the earth element in the right leg. Slowly making your way down to the ankle and the right foot. Fully pervaded by the stability, the firmness of earth. And then moving to the top of the left leg. And scanning downward, aware of earth element. Eventually coming to the foot, left foot. Stable earth element in the foot. And now shifting to become aware of water element in that left foot. The qualities of softening and smoothing and cohesion. Right? If you have earth and you add water, you get mud. So aware of the water element in the left foot, and beginning to move the attention back up that left leg, knowing that the whole body is pervaded by water. And then returning to the right foot, aware of water element. And moving up the right leg. Smoothing, softening water. Arriving at the hips. And moving up through the torso. Aware that every cell is water element. And then up to the right shoulder. Water element in the shoulder. And moving down, moving the attention down through the arm. Knowing the presence of water element. And the right hand. And then the left hand. Thoroughly pervaded by water element. all the way up the left arm. Those qualities of softening and smoothing and stickiness. Also, left shoulder pervaded by water. And up through the neck and the head. Water element in every cell. Right up to the crown. And now knowing the fire element. Fire element is heat in the body. And chemical reactions like the nerves and the digestion. All the energy. So starting at the crown of the head, aware that there's fire element throughout the head. The warmth of the body. Down through the neck. And moving into the right shoulder. The warmth of fire element throughout the body. Moving down the right arm. And coming to the right hand. Fire element in every cell. Shifting to the left hand. And when you're ready, up the left arm. Aware of the warmth of fire throughout the body. And then the left shoulder. And beginning to move down the torso. Perhaps noticing the heartbeat. That too is fire element. Slowly making your way down below the waist. Aware of fire element in every cell of the body. the hips, and moving down the right leg. This body is fire element. Arriving at the right foot, aware of fire element, and then shifting to the top of the left leg, scanning downward, aware of warmth, heat throughout the body. And then the left foot also fully pervaded by the fire element. And now the shift to the last element, the air element. So we know that there is oxygen in every cell. And by now you know the pattern. So just beginning with the left foot and scanning the whole body, aware of the lightness, the spaciousness of air throughout. Knowing this body as the air element. Lightness, spaciousness. Expansion. eventually arriving at the crown of the head. And then in these last few moments of the meditation, opening the attention to the whole body at once. Aware of this body as mere elements. All right, friends. So going to go ahead and transition to the Dhamma talk. So go ahead and get comfortable, and as usual, you can feel free to keep your camera on or off. But first, I'm going to begin the talk as usual with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So some of you know that I have been offering a course for Dhamma teachers called The Approach to Nibbana. And we're moving through various themes in that course. And this month, one of the themes is the 7 factors of awakening. And so I've been thinking quite a bit about them and about how we can bring about these conditions. And we can begin to foster the presence of these conditions in our lives, on the cushion and off the cushion. And so the 7 factors, just to name them: sati is mindfulness, Dhamma Vichaya is investigation of dhammas, investigation of principles, of things in general, of reality, of truths. There's a number of different ways you could think about that. Effort, virya, effort, piti, joy, then passaddhi, tranquility, and samadhi. My favorite translation of that is absorption or immersion, and then equanimity, upekkha. And so looking at these 7 factors, first of all, I have to say, if you just look at that list, right? If you just look at that list again, so let me just say them one more time. Mindfulness, right? And I'm looking at my sutta reference here because there's something in particular that I want to point out, and I'll talk to you about which sutta it is. Mindfulness, investigation of principles, energy, or effort, piti, which is joy or rapture, and then tranquility, and then samadhi, immersion or absorption, and then equanimity. So if you just hear that list, if you didn't know that those were the 7 factors of awakening and you just heard that list, you might not think that sounds so daunting, right? It's not saying that you need to know your past lives, or that you need to be able to apparate from room to room, or, or that you need to be able to read people's minds or anything else, right? There's just the basic some conditions that are very familiar, but that can be cultivated in a particular way that they lead to ultimate insight, life-changing insight. And so the question for us, I think, in large part is, how is that? What would that look like? What would that look like? And as I have suggested to some of you before, that is what the Pali Suttas are about. Much of what you find in what we call the Nikayas, or the discourses of early Buddhism, is the Buddha or various awakened nuns and monks of that time saying, this is what it looks like. This is what it would look like. It would look like this. It has these qualities. And in particular, I really want to focus on these first 2 qualities, on investigation and on mindfulness. And not because the 7 factors are necessarily developed or cultivated sequentially, but because I think that it's the mindfulness is certainly talked about a lot, but this quality, this factor of investigation, is one that, in my opinion, doesn't get enough attention or isn't well understood. And yet it is key. So this sutta that I want to talk about, so maybe some of you know that there's a group of discourses called the linked or the connected discourses, the Samyutta Nikaya, and the last major grouping there is called the Mahavagga, the Great Chapter, and it includes somewhat detailed teachings about these various frameworks for awakening. And so there's a whole section, a whole chapter 46, which is about the 7 factors and various discourses that were given about the 7 factors. But the second one of those discourses, so Samyutta Nikaya 46.2, is one that's called the body. And the Buddha starts out with this very, very simple metaphor. He says, The body is nourished by food. And in the same way, the hindrances or the obstacles to awakening, to clarity, are nourished by certain things. And these are the things. And he gives a list on the hindrances. And we can talk about hindrances if you like, but I'm trying to focus today on the factors of awakening. So he says, similarly, the body is sustained by food, and the factors of awakening have their nutriments or their fuel, as it's sometimes translated. And so, so in terms of investigation in particular, the Buddha says, what fuels the arising of the awakening factor of investigation of principles, or when it has arisen, fully develops it? There are qualities. So he makes a statement in an answer to his own question, his rhetorical question. There are qualities that are skillful and unskillful, blameworthy and blameless, inferior and superior, and those on the side of dark and bright. Frequent proper attention to them fuels the arising of the awakening factor of investigation of principles, or when it has arisen, fully develops it. And so the first thing that catches my eye here is it's particularly interesting that he's mentioning both, right? The skillful and the unskillful. The blameworthy, which means like things you could get in trouble for. That's the way I like to think about that. Or the blameless, right? Inferior and superior, meaning I think meaning something like what the Buddha would have thought of as like noble or dignified behavior or not. And then those on the side of dark and bright. So the dark and bright is usually associated with karma, right? The Buddha said that we are developing either dark karma, difficult, painful karmic consequences in the future, karmic energies in the future, in the present, or we're developing bright ones. So here's the thing. He's saying frequent, proper attention to both the skillful and the unskillful, the blameworthy and the blameless, the inferior and the superior, the dark and the bright. That is what will create the arising of investigation, right? So what is the key there? The key is the frequent, right? Over and over again, the repetition, the persistence of the practice, staying with it, seeing the same things over and over again, or using those same skills over and over again, and proper attention. Proper attention. So let's say, for the sake of discussion, that how would you have proper attention to something unskillful? So again, I don't want to talk a lot about the hindrances, but we could just pick one for the sake of discussion, right? So if I am doing something unskillful like self-loathing, and so I'm having a lot of thoughts like, I'm not a worthy person, and no wonder nobody likes me, everybody hates me, and I'll never get ahead at work because I'm just a crap, and there's just no reason to even think that people should appreciate me, et cetera, et cetera. So that some people have these kinds of thoughts. Maybe you have these kinds of thoughts periodically. So if you're having that, that's an unskillful and unwholesome quality of mind that's happening at that moment, right? But you could, with frequent proper attention, you could actually turn that into a factor of awakening. And how? So the difference is, if you see that thought coming up and you say, oh, I'm thinking that I'm not a worthy person. I'm thinking that people hate me. And that is a painful thought. That is a difficult thought. That might not even be an accurate thought, right? That would be proper attention to that unskillful quality, as distinct from the way that I was saying it earlier, right? Which is you're identified with that thing. I am that thing. I am that kind of a person. I am that thing, that thought, that quality, whatever it is. And similarly, even if you're having skillful thoughts, if you have improper attention to them, right? If you get identified with them, oh, I'm such a great person. I live the most ethical life. I am the most virtuous person. And there's nobody who touches me there. I have every right to judge the whole rest of the world because I am the virtuous person. Right? Then that's an improper attention. So even if it's a skillful activity that's happening, then that identification with it then corrupts it such that it cannot be a factor of awakening. Right? So you're starting to see where I'm going with this? So with investigation, it's pretty obvious, right? The use of the attention in the proper way, right? Which is, again, observing the mental and physical phenomena of our lives and understanding that that to the degree that we're identified with that, that's going to cause more suffering, rather than observing them as a phenomena that are there because there are the conditions that are there for them. Then we have that opportunity, right? And we have that opportunity to fall into something that is not going to be helpful. So let me make sure that I finish that off correctly. So our opportunity with regard to the practice of identifying skillful or unskillful thoughts or dark or bright karma is to not become identified with them, right? And understand them as phenomena. And pay attention to them, even if they're unskillful, but in the proper way, right? In the proper way. And frequently, right? So you need to be doing this over and over again. Oh, look, I'm having that thought again. Oftentimes, this is a very frustrating part of the practice, right? This can be a very difficult part of the practice. To see your habitual patterns of thought can be something that is difficult. But so developing the investigation allows you also to see causality. So this, I think I've shared with you before, the example of when I was on solo retreat and I was noticing the difference between mindfulness and investigation. So that first factor of mindfulness is probably word is sati. It is, what is it? It is a receptive kind of attention to phenomena in the present moment. That's really what sati is about. Receptive attention to phenomena in the present moment. It's non-judgmental, and it's just allowing things to come into awareness as they are present. But that kind of observation of phenomena doesn't necessarily capture the causality or capture the different factors that go together with that phenomena, right? Because it's the receptive part. So the investigation part is more active. So you can see the tree with mindfulness. The tree comes into awareness with mindfulness. I'm turning this way to look out the window there. You can receive the presence of the tree with mindfulness, but you can't really know about, for example, how tree as earth element interacts with sunlight as fire element and creates the shadow, unless you're actually applying the investigation, right? Unless you're looking at that phenomena as phenomena is interrelated with other things. So this quality of investigation relies on mindfulness. Because if a thing hasn't actually entered into our present moment awareness, then there's no way to investigate it at all, right? So it's got to somehow have come into our present moment awareness. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that in terms of an understanding of the relationship and an understanding ultimately of the three marks. And what are the three marks of reality? The impermanence of them, the unsatisfactoriness of them, and the you could say the impersonal nature of them, or the conditional nature of them, non-permanent, non-eternal, non-essential nature. That's what we mean by non-self. So looking at those two factors, again, it doesn't sound to me like such an impossible task. It doesn't sound like such an impossible task. It sounds like a kind of training that we can actually, that you and I can actually do, right? To begin to have this way. And so interestingly about sati, when the Buddha talks about the fuel for the awakening factor of mindfulness, he says the fuel is things that are grounds for mindfulness. So it's one of those suttas where some people want to go, wait, but you didn't answer the question. You didn't answer your own question there, right? But actually, the reason that it's stated that way, that things that are the ground for mindfulness are the fuel for mindfulness, is because virtually anything can be the grounds for mindfulness, right? If we had continuous mindfulness, then literally everything you came in contact with would be the fuel for mindfulness. Right? And again, he says, frequent, proper attention to them is what actually creates, is what actually makes a difference. Frequent, proper attention. So we know that the attention is also related to the mindfulness, right? Which that was already in the definition, but just to point that out again, right? Just to keep pointing this out again. And even the Buddha's last words, for example, were about this, right? Vaya Dhamma Sankara Apamadena Sampadita, right? He says, so Vaya Dhamma means things that are falling apart, sort of. That's one way to translate that. And Sankara is also things or compounded things. So compounded things are things that are falling apart. Conditioned things are things that are falling apart. And then apamadena. So this word means, it's an instrumental form. So it means using in the form of, by means of what? Apamada. And apamada is sometimes translated as diligence. So you might have heard that last phrase of the Buddha is strive on with diligence. I often wonder, was that like an English translator who gave the translation? Or like, who was that who gave that first version of it? Or that particular version of it, which probably wasn't the first. But that word strive, right, fails to capture the nuance. So actually, if you see, if you look at the Polytext Society dictionary, for example, or you look at the Abhidhamma, this word apamada means what? It means mindfulness, means sati. This receptive form of awareness. And sampadita is to complete or to fully accomplish. So he's saying fully accomplish the way with this receptive, attentive, present moment experience of your life. And so that sort of naturally leads on into the conversation about effort or virya. And deep bows to Bhikkhu Bodhi who does these kinds of things with the suttas. He did an analysis of the 37 wings of awakening. So many of you all might know that there are these 7 sets of factors or qualities that are said to be to represent basically the whole of the Buddha's description of the path, and they have overlapping qualities. So it's the four satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, right? It begins with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and then the 4 right strivings or the 4 right efforts, and the 4 bases of spiritual power. And then you have the 5 indriya, the 5 sort of faculties, and the 5 powers, which are the same thing, but whether they're cultivated or not. And then the 7 factors of awakening and the Noble Eightfold Path. And if you look at these lists, so I don't like to refer to think of them as lists in terms of practicing them, but if we look at them in terms of these groupings, actually the quality that is mentioned the most is energy, is effort, is virya, more even than mindfulness. It's mentioned 9 different times in those 7 frameworks. 9 different times. So what is the kind of effort that is going to be skillful? If we know that frequent proper attention is the key factor in all 7 of the factors, not just in sati, not just in investigation, in all 7 of the factors, he says, these are the qualities that are the basis, but it's the frequent proper attention to them that cultivates them to the point of being a factor of awakening. So the effort in this particular framework is defined quite differently than in most other places in the suttas. And so so what we find here is the 3 kinds of effort. And it's the let me make sure, I want to see, this is Bhante Sujata's translation, and I want to see the 3, I like his particular 3 words that he uses. So he uses these words: initiative, persistence, and exertion. Initiative, persistence, and exertion. So my interpretation of this is that when we look at effort on the path, that there are times when we are starting things up, right? Like when you sit down on the cushion, or when you first decided that you might practice, or when you are beginning a retreat, let's say, or any number of times where there is this initial state, right? This initial effort that's required. And that's a little bit stronger energy, oftentimes, right? That's going to require a little bit more effort, a little bit more energy. As you all probably, as many of you might have experienced, like you go on retreat and you kind of have to bring your body and mind into that way of being, right? You have to get comfortable with the schedule, with that amount of meditation, so many hours on the cushion and so on, right? Or your seat, whatever you're using for your equipment. So there's this initial energy, which is, you can imagine there's a stronger effort there. Similarly in samadhi, right? So if we think about how the first jhana develops, there's vitaka and vichara. There's the initial application of the mind on the object of concentration or of absorption. And then there is this persistence, or this kind of it's not the other kind of persistence, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's vichara, which is staying with the object long enough that it is the object, that it becomes the object, right? And not just a momentary experience. So that is a kind of active energy. That's an active effort that's happening in the establishing samadhi and establishing absorption states. And part of the reason why we know that is that those fall off later on as the absorption states get deeper. So second, third, fourth jhana, those qualities aren't needed anymore, and it has more of a momentum of its own, right? And then we shift into this other style of energy, this persistence style of energy, right? So this persistence style of effort, or the persistence aspect of effort. So this is where we have to learn as practitioners to give ourselves over to the momentum, right? Because both sides of the equation are necessary. Sometimes we need to make more effort, and other times we need to learn how to back off. We need to learn how to really, as I say, surrender or be carried by the flow of the momentum of the practice. Or you could say the alchemy of the coming together of the conditions that are present in that moment. Be willing to be with that. And then, however, you have this final aspect, this exertion, this third aspect, right? So this is like the Buddha sitting down under the Bodhi tree and saying, I'm not getting up until I wake up. Right? Or there might be, in terms of like insight practice, for example, like sitting, and knowing that, having a sense that you're going to stay with it, even if the body is getting painful. You're going to stay with it because the mind is in a place that's fruitful, where there's a possibility of some insight arising. So that's that final exertion aspect. And again, there can be a little bit more increase of the effort at that point. But I think that part of what I'm trying to share here is this discernment, that the discernment of how to apply ourselves is important, right? So the attention and the use of the effort is something that it requires us to actually bring ourselves, our efforts, use the energy of this life skillfully. And yet the art of it is to find the harmony of it, right? Is to find that kind of effort and attention which is in harmony with what's present. And making that discernment is why we build on that skill of mindfulness and use investigation as a factor throughout. And lastly, I want to add one more thing, which is that there are also in the commentaries a number of additional factors that are said to be helpful in establishing the 7 factors of awakening and establishing these sets of conditions. And there are a lot of them, so we're not going to go through them. But I will say this, that in terms of mindfulness in particular, one of the conditions is hanging around with people who are mindful. So I highly recommend that. I highly recommend that to all of you, right? To really, that finding folks who also value this way of being present for our lives and developing that real clarity, those life-changing insights. That is one of the most important, and I would add, one of the most joyful things you can do for yourself, is to find those folks who will be a support. So that is what I wanted to say today. Thank you so much for your attention to the talk this evening, weaving together as best I could those first three factors of awakening. And we can talk about the other ones too if you would like. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this point as